Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere loud, like surprisingly loud. You're stepping into the cramped, echoey stairwells of ancient Rome's insulae. Those rickety apartment blocks where the ceilings leaked, the neighbors bickered, and snoring wasn't just a nuisance, it was a minor form of psychological warfare. You can almost hear it now. One guy sawing logs on the top floor, another grumbling below, someone yelling, "Tacete," through a wall thinner than a cracker. And here you are, nestled between them, clutching your straw pillow like it's armor. Now, you might think your neighbors are noisy, but if you lived on the 5th floor of an ancient Roman tenement, no plumbing, no elevators, just wooden beams and prayers, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the bottom of a steep, worn staircase, a jug of water in one hand, a flickering oil lamp in the other. The stones are warm underfoot, radiating heat from a day that scorched the city walls. You glance up. 5 stories of groaning timber and brick, stacked like bread loaves. This is your home now. A classic Roman insula. Insulae were multi-story apartment complexes, usually owned by a landlord too rich to live in them. The poor took the top floors closer to the heavens, but also to the danger, fires, collapses, floods. Those happened up high. Richer folks rented ground-level rooms, close to public latrines and taverns, but at least they weren't climbing 100 steps to bed. The walls, made of mud brick, occasionally plastered, sometimes just wishful thinking, soundproofing. Hilarious. You didn't just hear your neighbors, you absorbed them, their gossip, their midnight arguments, and their snores, those deep, vibrating animal groans that turned ceilings into tuning forks. Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually got much sleep at all. Many were up with the sun, worked long hours, and partied or shouted at their children late into the night. But one thing's certain, sleep was communal, and so were the disturbances. The apartment you step into tonight, it's maybe 10 square meters. A small oil stove smokes in the corner. There's no door, just a curtain. You share it with 2 roommates, a fishmonger with the breath of Poseidon, and a man who claims to be a retired charioteer, but mostly just drinks vinegar wine and mutters about wheels in his dreams. And when the snoring starts, oh, it starts. You lie back on your itchy wool blanket and feel the tremors in your chest. It's not just the guy next to you, it's the one below you, above you, the one across the hallway. There's a chorus of nasal avalanches, sputtering throat flutters, and the occasional surprise snort gasp from someone with a deviated septum and too much lentil stew. Now, Romans didn't exactly have CPAP machines, but they were a clever people. Some tenants would shove tufts of wool into their ears. Others chewed bay leaves, believing the aroma would drive away snoring spirits. And if that didn't work, you'd just nudge the snorer with your foot, or your water jug, or a broom handle you kept under your cot for this exact purpose. The buildings creak through the night, pipes gurgle, a baby cries, a dog barks, then silence sweet, blessed silence for about 30 seconds before the snoring returns. Louder, more determined, you start fantasizing about sleeping at the baths or inside the bakery kilns. Fun fact, some insulae were so unstable, tenants weren't allowed to cook indoors. Fires broke out constantly, and many blamed them on sleepwalking bakers or disgruntled tenants trying to quiet a snoring neighbor the Roman way with fire and plausible deniability. You wrap a cloth around your head. It helps a little. Then someone knocks over a chamber pot above you, and you swear you're never sleeping again. And yet, somehow, this chaos becomes your lullaby. The snoring, the creaking, the hum of street vendors setting up for dawn, it all blends together. Sleep in ancient Rome wasn't about silence. It was about surrender, giving in to the noise, the heat, the closeness of humanity pressed together like figs in a jar. Tomorrow, you'll complain to the landlord. Again, he'll nod. Again, and nothing will change. Again, because this is Rome. And in Rome, even your dreams have roommates. You wake with a start, blinking at the ceiling where a crack has deepened since last night. Or maybe it was always there and now your mind, foggy with half sleep, just chooses to notice, somewhere above you, someone coughs twice, then lets out a deep, gurgling snore that makes the clay amphora near your bed vibrate slightly. Welcome to the middle floors, the most cursed layer of Roman apartment living. Not quite poor enough to be relegated to the top, but definitely not rich enough for the ground. You're sandwiched in purgatory. And when it comes to noise, this is where the snore wars truly begin. You shift on your cot, which groans like a dying mule. You stare at the thin wall that separates you from your neighbor, some old man with a deviated septum and what sounds like an undiagnosed respiratory demon lodged in his chest. He snores in loops, 6 long exhales, 1 sharp gasp, then a coughing fit. Repeat. You've memorized it, like a tragic lullaby. Now, you're not alone in your suffering. The snoring reaches every unit. A pregnant woman 2 doors down pounds the wall every night with her sandal. A baker's apprentice below you retaliates by hammering the floor with his rolling pin in a rhythm only sleep-deprived revenge could devise. It's not uncommon to hear shouted threats through the night. Turn your head or turn your lease over. Gaius. Roman insulae were built fast and often cheaply. The materials, a mix of brick, timber, plaster, and prayer. Sound traveled through them the way rumors did at the baths, instantly and without mercy. Historians still argue whether this communal exposure to constant noise altered how Romans thought about privacy. Some believe it was simply not a concept. If someone was snoring, you didn't think he was the problem. You thought the gods were testing your patience. So you did what most tenants did. You tried not to care. You'd bury your face in a rough cloth, stuff waxed cotton in your ears if you could afford it, or recite boring lines from Virgil's Aeneid to bore yourself to sleep. One desperate neighbor began sleeping upright in an amphora, claiming it echoed the snoring away. Mostly, he just got moldy. You remember when a new tenant moved in a timid young guy with a musical voice and a clay tablet of fancy poetry? The first night, he wept, said he hadn't realized city life was so nasal. The second night, he tried to bribe the loudest snorer with fresh figs. Didn't work. By the third, he started snoring himself, like the building had infected him. And it's not just human noises. Rats scuttle in the beams. Cats chase them. The occasional loose goose honks up a stairwell like it owns the place. One time, a tenant upstairs tried keeping a monkey. Didn't last long. Too many squawks and nighttime bouncing. The monkey got evicted before the humans did. You glance at the ceiling again, not because it's interesting, but because that's where the worst snorer is tonight. His breaths don't even sound human. They resemble wind dragging over gravel. You imagine what he looks like. Mouth open, limbs spread, dead to the world, while the rest of you lay awake, plotting carpeted revenge. There's an unspoken tradition in Roman insulae. If someone snores too loud for too many nights in a row, other tenants take action. First come the polite warnings, scratched notes on the wall, coins drop through ceiling cracks, sometimes even a baked treat laced with sleep herbs. Then come the less polite methods. You once heard a story about a guy whose neighbors stuffed raw garlic under his bed while he slept. The smell was supposed to drive away spirits, or just make him leave. Another time, someone poured olive oil on a snorer's door latch so he couldn't open it in the dark. These people weren't criminals. They were sleep-deprived innovators. There's no security guard, no hotline, no manager, just the understanding that if you snore like a wild boar in mating season, the entire building might become your enemy. Some would even whisper threats through the walls. One popular phrase, "The Furies hear everything." It sounded mythic. It also meant, shut up before we do something regrettable. And you sleepless, irritated. Adjusting your ear cloth again, you feel both pity and murderous intent. You know that snorer can't help it, but you also know you haven't had more than 4 solid hours of sleep in weeks. You even tried sleeping outside once, but the street dogs howled like mourners and a night soil cart nearly ran you over. As the snoring builds, more voices joining in, like instruments in a tragic orchestra. You wonder if this was part of Roman city design. Maybe the constant noise kept people alert. Maybe insomnia was a form of civic duty. Maybe Rome wasn't built in a day because nobody was well rested enough to finish anything. Then, all at once, silence. The loudest snorer stops. Everyone seems to freeze. No creaks, no snorts, just stillness. You wonder if he died, or turned over, or finally accepted his destiny and moved to the countryside. Either way, you exhale, body sinking into your cot. It's not comfortable, but for the first time tonight, it's quiet. You close your eyes, daring sleep to find you. Then, from the next unit over, a snort, a wheeze, and the whole miserable lullaby begins again. You don't remember falling asleep, just that you wake up with a jolt, heart pounding, jaw clenched because it sounds like someone's dragging a chair across your skull. But there's no furniture being moved, just Brutus the Butcher. Upstairs, shifting in bed again, his snoring has range now, high-pitched at the inhale, like someone trying to suck a date pit through a reed, and low and rumbling on the exhale, like distant thunder beneath wet wool. You sit up. This can't go on. You need a plan. Romans may not have had foam earplugs, but oh, did they get creative. Some early forms of soundproofing were downright tragic. You pull aside a ratty curtain and inspect your wall. There, stuffed into a crack, is a wad of sheep's wool pressed between two shards of pottery. You remember your neighbor telling you to try it? Wool muffles the sounds of demons and drunks, she'd said with a wink. She left out the part about it attracting bugs. A more elaborate fix. Clay amphora fragments broke in storage jars stacked inside the wall gaps. Not for stability, no, these were acoustic patches, wedged in to bounce or dampen sound, depending on your level of desperation. Historians still argue whether this tactic was actually useful or just symbolic, like waving a censer full of herbs around a haunted bedpost. Then there were wall hangings. You peek at yours now, a fraying tapestry of Ceres that supposedly absorbs mouth sounds. It mostly absorbs dust. Still, better than nothing. Weirder still, some folks hung fish bladders over their doorways, stretched thin and tied at the corners. They'd rustle if someone was approaching or if hung properly. Help echo away sound. One tenant claimed it soothed snoring. Another claimed it just made things smell worse. The most expensive method. Plastering the walls again. A fresh skim of lime and marble dust was said to dull sharp noises. But you needed money, or a very charming landlord to get that done. And charm is hard to conjure on no sleep. You lie back again, staring at your ceiling. Once, out of sheer desperation, you tried lining the rafters above your bed with barley husks. The idea was that sound waves would get stuck in them like flies in honey. You got that tip from a guy who read about it in an old herbal scroll, probably while hallucinating from poppy tea. There's a fringe theory, and yes, real academics whisper about this over lukewarm conference wine that some Romans constructed partial false walls for noise control. These weren't structural, just inner frames made of reed matting, spaced a few fingers from the actual wall. If you stood between them, it felt like a room inside a room. One archaeologist dubbed it the Roman panic cocoon. Others argue it was probably just cheap insulation to keep winter winds out. Still, you can't help but imagine a tenant crouched between walls, wrapped in a blanket, whispering curses toward the ceiling. The snoring continues. One pattern fades, another swells. You've started recognizing who snores by the tone. There's Crispus, the street musician, whose snoring sounds like an old reed flute, and then Agrippina next door, who somehow snores while talking. It is not words. Exactly. Just the shape of words, like dreams echoing out of her mouth. You consider your options. Shoving a blanket in the corner. Done. Moving your cot. No room. Confronting Brutus the Butcher. You remember what happened last time someone tried that? There was an argument. Loud words. The smell of pickled pork. And then silence for 3 nights. You thought maybe he'd left, but it turned out he just stuffed his nose with mashed figs and nearly choked. Still, there's something oddly soothing about the effort. The rituals, the herbs, the muttered threats. Snoring became part of the rhythm of Roman nightlife, much like the pounding bread ovens or the slosh of wine being poured. It simply was a soundscape of survival. You reach under your cot and pull out a little box of lavender bark. You'd meant to burn it at sunrise as an offering, but tonight, it's for you. The smoke curls toward the ceiling like a sleepy serpent. The scent softens the air, blending with the mildew and faint traces of goat. For a moment, you feel calm. Then Brutus changes sides. His snore deepens into something almost primal. You swear you hear a second voice in it. Your eyes narrow. Maybe it's time to try what that woman in the alley once told you. The olive trick. You chew 3 brined olives and spit the pits into a clay bowl beneath your cot. According to street lore, this traps unwanted sound demons. A part of you knows this is ridiculous. The other part knows Agrippina's ghost words got quieter after she started doing it. And so you sleep again, if not deeply. Then, at least strategically, you've created a wall of soft smells and cracked pottery, a fortress made of folk tricks and borrowed prayers. Tomorrow, you'll ask your landlord if he knows someone who can adjust the ceiling beams. You don't expect much, but maybe he'll send someone to poke Brutus. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll finally learn how to snore back, louder. The next day begins with a bucket of lukewarm water dumped down the stairwell, whether by accident or passive aggression. You're never quite sure. You duck just in time, curse softly, and begin your daily ritual of stretching out the aches from another barely slept through night. It's market day, and the entire insula seems to creak awake like a crusty old grandfather with gout in both knees. Your landlord, Publius Tarsius. Maximus, known less formally and less kindly as Sleeplord Pub, is seated near the entrance. Chewing olives and pretending to read a wax tablet that's clearly blank, he's dressed like a man who wants you to think he's important. A toga slightly too clean for someone who's never lifted a finger, and sandals that look expensive until you notice the soles are made of repurposed rope. You approach, cautiously, snoring. You say, he doesn't look up. Define snoring. You blink. The man upstairs is shaking the walls. Publius sighs. Then it's not snoring. It's structural. That's the thing about landlords in Rome. They weren't just property owners. They were full-time negotiators, part-time philosophers, and occasional tyrants. Your rent didn't guarantee peace. It bought you a chance to argue for peace. And that was a luxury in itself. Some landlords were kinder. Others, like Publius, preferred to weaponize paperwork. He once made a tenant sign a clay shard promising not to complain for a full moon cycle. Another time, he fined a woman for complaining, claiming her voice echoed more than the actual snoring. Still, landlords could take action. If enough tenants banded together, something magical happened. The scroll of non-habemus quietum was drafted. Literally, we have no rest. 5 or more complaints, sealed in wax, delivered to Publius with a loaf of sweetbread and the promise of renewed rent. Then, and only then, might he consider helping? Of course, help came in many forms. He might send his nephew, a boy named Lurio, who once tried to fix a leaking pipe by stuffing it with figs. Lurio's snore solution: sprinkling crushed mint leaves outside the offender's door and whispering, "Sleep, sleep. Go away 3 times. Surprisingly, that did work once. Probably a coincidence, or fear of Lurio's return. Other times, Publius would invoke a clause hidden in the lease scroll, the right of repositioning. This allowed him to swap tenants between floors at will for the harmonious balance of the building. In practice, it meant the loud snorer got moved closer to those who complained, as if punishing everyone for daring to hope. Historians still argue whether Roman landlords actually cared about tenant well-being or merely enjoyed the performance of justice. Some scrolls suggest elite landlords kept lists of noisy but loyal tenants they refused to evict because they paid on time. Others paint them as local kings with god complexes and unlimited olive oil. Once, you heard a rumor may be true, maybe not, that a landlord in Trastevere paid a flute player to perform nightly outside the worst snorer's window. The theory: drown him out. The result: chaos. The snorer loved it. The rest of the building rioted. You watch Publius scratch his chin, still pretending to read. Behind him, a tenant with bags under his eyes gestures silently. Don't bother, but you persist. Perhaps he could be incentivized. Publius finally looks up. With what? You reach into your satchel, a small amphora, olive oil first press. You saved it for winter. It glistens like liquid gold. Publius eyes it, then smiles. "Give me 2 days," he says. And just like that, the gears begin turning. Not official gears. Mind you, Rome didn't have a housing authority, but something older, slipperier. Word spreads. People whisper, someone sharpens a reed stylus. You find yourself wondering if Publius actually has a plan, or just likes watching the building squirm. Later that evening, a new wax notice is posted on the stairwell. Quietus mandatum. All tenants shall observe auditory moderation from sundown to sunrise. Violators subject to relocation. It's written in shaky Latin and sealed with what smells suspiciously like fish glue. You read it. Everyone reads it, even Brutus, upstairs. And that night, he still snores, but softer, slower. Like a bear trying not to wake its mate. Maybe he was warned. Maybe Publius did speak to him. Or maybe your amphora of olive oil worked some strange landlord magic, passed down from toga-wearing ancestors who, too, could not sleep while the walls vibrated. You lie down, heart hopeful, and let the quiet roll over you, at least until Agrippina starts talking in her sleep again. The next day, the stairwell is buzzing, not with bees, those prefer the form's marble cracks, but with gossip, smirks, and whispered reenactments of last night's quietus mandatum. You overhear two neighbors debating whether Brutus the butcher has been drugged, threatened, or perhaps possessed by the spirit of a considerate sleeper. There's even talk that he's been replaced entirely. That's not the same man. One tenant hisses, "Too peaceful. I don't trust it." But peace, as always in Rome, is fragile. By mid-afternoon, a clay scroll arrives, not from Publius, but from the local aedile, one of those busybody civil magistrates who makes rules nobody remembers until they suddenly apply to you. It's stamped with the official seal of insula fortunatae, an owl perched on a cracked tile. Very intimidating. The scroll reads, "All tenants are reminded that complaints regarding noise must be filed through proper civic procedure. Malicious complaints will incur penalty. Repeat offenders may be relocated under emergency decree." It's vague and threatening, and entirely typical of how Roman bureaucracy functioned. Just enough menace to feel real, but fuzzy enough to ignore if you had the right friends or bribes. See, while Rome didn't have a formal snoring law, it did have noise ordinances. Officially, loud shouting after curfew could be fined. Unruly taverns, shuttered. Roosters crowing at the wrong hour, confiscated. Historians still argue whether personal noises like snoring ever counted. Most believe the law didn't reach that far into the bedroom. But in tightly packed buildings with acoustics that could carry a yawn 3 floors down, the line between private and public nuisance blurred fast. And sometimes, the tenants themselves pushed that line. You remember the case of old Domitius, a man whose snoring was so intense it allegedly triggered a miscarriage in the unit below. The woman, a former acrobat, took the case to the praetor urbanus, the city magistrate. She claimed Domitius had assaulted her unborn child via breaths. The magistrate laughed, then fined her for interrupting his lunch. But things escalated. The woman returned the next week with 5 witnesses and a painted tablet illustrating Domitius's sleeping posture. The case became something of a local sensation. Domitius, humiliated, offered to pay a small settlement and promised to start sleeping upright. He didn't, but he did move into a bakery storeroom, where the yeast fumes reportedly softened his breathing. And so, that precedent was born. Snoring as civil offense. Not enforceable exactly, but negotiable, which in Rome was the same thing. You begin drafting your own wax tablet. It's short, formal, resigned. Something like, "To the Honorable Aedile, with respect, the undersigned requests review of auditory disturbances originating nightly from upper unit occupant. Said disturbances impede sleep, cause distress, and may violate communal harmony. In good faith, we request intervention." Then you sign your name. Add a sprig of rosemary, an old Roman symbol of clarity, and drop it in the wooden box on the second floor labeled petitionis, which, let's be honest, is mostly used to store abandoned sandals and old rat traps. A part of you knows this probably won't lead anywhere, but it feels good, proactive, almost noble. You imagine being mentioned in some dusty scholar scroll centuries from now. Citizen of modest rank seeks justice against nocturnal beast. You step outside for air. The sun is setting. Laundry sways like tired flags from every balcony. A woman sings to her baby in Dorian mode. It's off-key, but beautiful. Then comes the sound. Not a snore, a snort, a warning flare. Brutus again, revving up. But before the storm fully breaks, you hear a tap, tap, tap. Someone knocks at his door. Low voices, footsteps. A silence follows. It's heavy, weighted, like the building is holding its breath. And that night, for the first time in a week, you sleep through the night. Not a perfect sleep. You dream of frogs playing flutes, but you wake with your heart still, your neck not twisted, your ear cloth undisturbed. Maybe it was the complaint, maybe it was the olive oil, or maybe, just maybe, Brutus found love and now sleeps on someone else's floor. You don't ask, you don't want to jinx it, you just roll over, grateful, and let the dull hum of Roman life buzz in the background. Street vendors, cartwheels, someone arguing with a goose, all the usual. You wake to a rooster that doesn't belong to anyone but seems to live in the alley rent-free. It's hoarse, possibly older than the form itself, and it crows like it's personally offended that you slept so well. Still, you sit up slowly, savoring the unfamiliar sensation of a night unmarred by ceiling-thumping nasal warfare. But peace never lingers long in a Roman insula. As you shuffle toward the water basin to splash your face, you catch wind of something. Sharp, not rot, exactly. Something ritualistic. You peer into the hallway, garlic, strung from the doorknob of the second-floor unit, tied in a crude loop with what looks like horsehair, and dusted with something silvery ash. Perhaps next to it, on the ground, a tiny clay dish containing 3 pebbles, a smear of honey, and what might be a dead beetle, all arranged carefully, almost reverently. You freeze. Someone's performed a ritual. You knock softly on the door, and the old woman who opens it smells like fennel and bad decisions. Her name is Livia. She's lived here longer than the walls. Her eyes are sharp, her fingers crooked, and her voice the sound of torn papyrus. You see it. She rasps, nodding at her door offering, "I do. Anti-snore charm." She says, "Old method. Pre-Augustan. From my mother's side." You blink. Does it work? Livia shrugs. Depends how guilty the snorer feels. That's the thing about magical thinking in Rome. It wasn't fringe. It was woven into everyday life. People believed dreams were messages, omens hid in liver spots, and snoring. That was spiritual misalignment, an imbalance of breath, a flaw in the soul's rhythm. So naturally, there were cures. Some people burned bay leaves under their beds. Others painted their ceilings with crushed oyster shells mixed with vinegar, said to echo back the snore and confuse the demon. You once met a man who buried an eel spine in his pillow for 7 nights. It worked, but then he couldn't stop whispering in his sleep. The law of unintended consequences. Historians still argue whether these rituals were sincerely believed or just social tools. Silent messages to the snorer. A passive-aggressive hex. There was even a charm involving a bronze bell. If you hung the bell above your door and rang it once every time someone snored past the 4th breath, it was supposed to break the loop. The theory: snoring was a cycle, and you had to interrupt it just so, or the spirit of sleep would become stuck in the walls. One man in your building tried this and ended up with insomnia and a stolen bell. You try to recall other folk remedies. One involves sleeping with a laurel leaf in your mouth. Another called for painting one's eyelids with mustard paste, not to stop the snoring. Just to remind you, it's better to be awake than listening. You glance down the hallway. Another charm has appeared, this one on Brutus's door. It's a charcoal sketch of a closed mouth with a single X through it, pinned with a fishbone. So now you have ritual warfare. It's not malicious. Not yet. This is the pre-battle phase. Signs, smells, symbols, a kind of magical diplomacy. Warnings offered with herbs instead of fists. But things escalate fast in a building where sleep is the most precious commodity. You remember that one spring when the tenants tried a coordinated curse? Everyone was given a clay pebble to place outside their doors, the snore stones. If they all turned them over at the same hour, it was said to silence any spirit of noise for 3 nights. They tried it. It worked, until a child picked them all up and threw them into a goat cart for fun. Still, the magic persists. Rome was a city of scrolls and senators. Yes, but also of whispers, omens, curses muttered behind door frames and protective figs hidden under beds. And when it came to snoring, logic lost to symbolism every time. That night, you light your own charm. Just a dried orange peel, tied with wool, hung above your cot. You don't believe it'll do much, but maybe the gesture itself helps. Maybe it tells the building, "I'm trying. Please give me a break." You lie down. The garlic smell hangs thick in the air. Someone chants softly in Latin. You hear the rustle of fish bones brushing against a doorframe. And then, "Os armeis sonia os." Omnium. The snores begin. Faint, distant, but broken, fragmented, as if the building itself walls. Floor. Stone has started to push back. The charm war escalates before breakfast. Someone leaves a small wax figure at the stairwell, landing a squat, wide-nosed effigy with its mouth crudely sealed shut using what appears to be plum paste. It's propped against a fig leaf and smeared with something reddish-brown. Is it brick dust? Dried blood. Tomato. You don't ask. By mid-morning, every floor smells like garlic, incense, and passive-aggressive incense substitutes. You pass a door strung with sage bundles. Another tenant has chalked protective symbols along her window ledge. Someone else, perhaps joking, perhaps not, has started softly chanting every time Brutus's door creaks open. It's no longer just about one man snoring. It's about sleep justice. A movement, a quiet rebellion in pajamas and fraying tunics. And then come the whispers of the patrols. You first hear about them while fetching water. Two boys are arguing about whether their uncle got shamed last week by the soft feet. You pause. That's the name. That's what they're calling themselves. Nocturni Pedis, the silent feet. They're not official, of course, but neither is most of Roman life. These are self-appointed vigilantes, tenants too tired to wait for Publius, too broke for legal channels, and too clever to suffer in silence. They walk the halls at night, wrapped in linen to muffle their steps, listening. They don't attack, they expose. Their methods are theatrical. If they catch you snoring excessively, and that term is, of course, never clearly defined, they leave signs. Sometimes a single olive pit on your doorstep, other times a fish scale balanced on your doorframe. One snorer woke up to find the word boar scratched into his lintel. No violence, no confrontation, just quiet, deliberate humiliation. You're not sure how to feel about them. On the one hand, you appreciate their commitment. You too have suffered. You too have counted ceiling beams at 2 a.m. and whispered threats into your blanket. On the other hand, there's something chilling about being watched in your sleep. Historians still argue whether groups like this truly existed, or were the fevered dreams of exhausted tenants. But fragments of clay tablets have been found listing sleep rules, likely posted in communal dwellings. Breathe through nose. Do not sigh 3 times in a row. No dreaming out loud, whether real or symbolic. These rules shape behavior. The fear of being labeled a snorer, a public nuisance, was enough to change how people slept. So now you lie in bed, not just uncomfortable, not just irritated, but self-aware, hyper-conscious of every breath. You try breathing shallowly. You turn your face to the wall. You clench your jaw. What if you've become the enemy? This is how it spreads. Sleep becomes performance. You try to inhale politely. You suppress coughs. Your dreams become quieter, less dramatic, like theater pieces performed behind a curtain. You once read a scrap of poetry scrawled on a tavern wall. In Rome, even our sleep wears sandals, and now you understand it. Rest here isn't real. It's curated, co-managed, monitored. At midnight, you hear them. Soft feet, linen dragging. A door creaks, a whisper, then nothing. You lie frozen, pretending to sleep convincingly. You even mouth a fake snore. Then stop worried they'll think you're mocking them. Someone breathes just outside your curtain, not deeply, just enough. You feel exposed, vulnerable. Then they move on, and you exhale. In the morning, a tenant finds a sardine head outside her door. No one admits to snoring. No one challenges the sign. It becomes part of the rhythm. Eat, work, fear snoring, fear not snoring. The soft feet have redefined sleep itself, and in a strange way, it helps. Tenants begin whispering good luck at night instead of sleep well. Brutus, once a menace, now croaks softly into a pillow. Agrippina mutters quieter. Even Livia stops burning garlic, replacing it with lavender sachets. The building breathes easier. You still can't decide whether to fear or thank the vigilantes. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, you fall asleep, not from exhaustion, but from quiet. And when you wake, there's nothing on your doorstep. No olive pit, no fish scale, no chalk symbols, just morning light, soft as a yawn, curling through the curtain. The city of Rome stirs early, but Ostia stirs weird. You've taken a temporary leave from the insula. Not forever, just a little break. A friend of a friend needed help unloading amphora near the docks of Ostia, and you jumped at the excuse to escape the cursed stairwells and cursed garlic charms and cursed vigilante feet. Plus, there's a rumor that people sleep in Ostia really sleep, like entire nights, unbroken. Dream-filled, you arrive with modest expectations and a travel pack full of lavender, just in case. Ostia is Rome's gateway to the sea. Wine deer, flatter, and just as full of stray cats. But the air here smells different, brine, baked bread, oil from distant fish presses in the buildings. Though similar in design, don't echo the way your old insula does. There's a softness, a stillness. You ask around, and that's when you first hear the phrase whispered like a secret incantation. Snore tax. You laugh. You think it's a joke? But no, some say it was the brainchild of Emperor Claudius. Others blame a particularly vindictive landlord named Decimus, who once lived above a man that snored like a collapsing aqueduct. Regardless of its origin, the story goes like this. There was a time in Ostia when snoring was formally taxed. Not for everyone. Just repeat offenders, documented ones. If a tenant received more than 3 written complaints etched in clay, sealed with oil, submitted to a magistrate, they were summoned for an auditory examination. Yes, you heard that correctly, an auditory examination. According to surviving fringe commentary from a scroll misfiled in the Ostian bath records, the process went something like this. The accused was made to nap in a designated chamber, while 3 witnesses sat nearby, with ears stuffed with wool so they could feel the vibrations rather than hear them outright. If the tremors reached a certain potency, the measurement term is lost to history. The snorer was fined a portion of their monthly grain ration. Historians still argue whether this ever actually happened, or if it was satirical folklore meant to mock Ostian bureaucrats. But graffiti found near the amphitheater references something called aerarium subsomnus, literally, the sleep treasury, suggesting at least a half-believed system was once in place. More intriguing, the taxes, when collected, weren't kept by the government. They were redistributed as compensation to affected neighbors. Meaning, if someone snored, you got paid, which explains what you witnessed that evening. A pair of tenants sitting calmly outside their insula door, sipping fish sauce tea and smiling. They each have a small tablet tied to their tunics that reads, Beneficiary, Class C. You ask, they explain. Their neighbor snores, loudly, documented, approved. And now they're owed a quarter loaf of bread every 5th day he doesn't improve. It's poetic and lucrative enough that some tenants hope for new, noisy neighbors. One man you meet claims he's developed a method to exaggerate the recorded snoring, hollowing out part of his floorboards to act as amplifiers, funneling the sound directly to the walls of his designated complainants. It's theater, he says, smiling. Communal theater. You're not sure whether to admire or report him. Then there's the flip side. The snorers themselves. In Ostia, snorers have developed entire defense strategies. Some hire witnesses to testify that the noise came from a neighbor's rooster. Others claim sleepwalking. A few even pretend to be possessed, since religious exemptions are, apparently, still valid. One former mosaic artist claims to have slept in a tub of sand for months, training his body to exhale silently. Breath control, he says. Snore prevention starts in the diaphragm. You're exhausted just listening. By the 2nd night, you rent a cot in one of Ostia's so-called whisper units. It's a room with double thick walls, wool-lined beams, and signs that read, No night coughing and sneezes. After midnight must be held in. You lie down. Silence. Total silence. It unnerves you. No Brutus, no Agrippina, no fishbone hexes, not even a goose passing judgment in the dark. Just the rhythmic lapping of water in a nearby canal, a distant market cart, your own heartbeat, and somehow you can't sleep. You miss the noise, the chaos, the cursed, communal closeness of your insula. You roll over. Eventually, you sleep. But your dreams are strange, full of snore courts, whispered taxes, and a judge pounding a gavel made of garlic. You wake wondering, was it a better night's sleep or just a quieter kind of unrest? You return to Rome with a sack of dried dates, a head full of whispers, and exactly 0 illusions about ever sleeping normally again. Ostia had been silent, sure but sterile, too quiet, too disciplined, like a library where someone's always watching. It made you nostalgic for your grimy wheezing, fish sauce-scented insula and all its restless, snorting characters. The first night back, your cot feels foreign. These sounds, oh, how they've returned. A baby cries 3 floors up. Someone stomps because of it. Someone else sings a lullaby aggressively, like a musical threat. And Brutus, he's back. You don't know where he went, or what beast he offended in Ostia. But his snores have returned with renewed theatricality, more dynamic, less volume, more variation, yet something's changed. Maybe it's you, or maybe it's the building, because now you notice strange alterations inside the insula. Little architectural tweaks not sanctioned by Publius. He's still pretending to read his wax tablet outside, probably upside down. First, there are new wall coverings. Not tapestries, not charms, barley mats. Thin slats woven from straw and barley husk, pressed between clay tiles and wall panels. They appear in doorways, across windows, even above one particularly notorious snorer's bed. You ask where they came from. Claudius Street, someone mutters, from a carpenter who couldn't sleep. They're supposedly a form of acoustic deflection angled slightly to bounce breath back toward the sleeper. The theory is that snoring is self-sustaining, that hearing one's own breath reinforces the rhythm. So if you subtly redirect it, you interrupt the loop, like tapping a metronome offbeat. Historians still argue whether these modifications were actually effective or just wishful architecture. But they're everywhere now. Then there's the angled beds. Not everyone has one, but those who do rave. The idea is simple. Tilt the sleeper's head just enough to open the airways, but not so much they slide off the cot. Some use bricks, others sandbags. One man boasts he sleeps on a wine barrel tilted sideways. Best dreams I've ever had. He claims, though he also says his toes are numb. And let's not forget the vibrating floors. Yes, vibrating. Not on purpose, not mechanized. Just a side effect of old Roman woodwork. But some tenants have figured out how to weaponize it. If a neighbor snores too loudly, the floorboards are gently knocked in rhythm, like a lullaby with vengeance. Enough to jar, never enough to bruise. You ask one tenant how she learned the technique. She nods sagely. My mother played the lyre. I play the ceiling. There's even talk of snore corridors, narrow gaps built into newer insula designs that serve as acoustic funnels, like a wind tunnel, but for sound. The theory, direct snoring upward into an unused attic or toward a noisy tavern. Essentially, redirect the crime. It's brilliant and unprovable. Most of these innovations exist somewhere between truth and folklore, between construction and conspiracy, but they reflect something deeper. Rome's tireless need to tinker with discomfort until it becomes survivable, or better yet, sellable, because now people start charging. Want to rent an angled cot, 1 denarius per night. Want barley matting installed behind your bed, 2. If you bring your own straw, there's even a man who claims to bless rooms against snoring, though mostly he just walks around clapping and muttering about airflow. And you adapt. You borrow a mat. You adjust your pillow. You learn to sleep on your side with one leg draped over a broken amphora to stay balanced. You also learn something else. That in Rome, the problem is never just the noise, it's how you respond to it. Silence is rare here, but ingenuity, that's endless. Tonight, you drift off to a blend of snoring, market carts, soft chanting, and the occasional thud of someone adjusting a sandbag under their cot, and it all becomes comforting. This isn't quiet, but it's home. There's a new man in the building. You don't know his name. No one does. He arrived 3 days ago carrying a folding stool, a brass lantern, and a scroll so thick it had to be strapped shut with belt leather. He wears a sleeveless tunic, sandals with reinforced heels, and a smug expression like he's perpetually suppressing a yawn on purpose. The neighbors call him the Night Walker. He doesn't rent a unit. He doesn't sleep here. He just shows up after sunset, like a bat in municipal linen. He climbs the stairs methodically, pausing at each floor, listening. He jots things down on wax tablets. He smells faintly of pine tar and something metallic. And somehow, people start sleeping better. The rumor spreads fast. He's not a ghost, not a magistrate, not even a relative of Publius. Thank the gods! He's what the city calls a nocturnus auxiliator, a freelance night regulator. Part mystic, part civil engineer, part annoyance. His job, sleep arbitration. He doesn't threaten, doesn't curse. He intervenes, gently. creatively, with tools and tricks so bizarre you assume he made them up just to look busy. Last night, you caught him gently tapping a brass rod against a lintel while muttering, "Breathe like the trees, not like the chariot." This morning, you noticed Agrippina's door had a smear of red clay around the frame, acoustic clay. He calls it allegedly dampens throat-driven echoes. She says she slept like a baked bean in a cool jar. Whatever that means, she looks refreshed. Historians still argue whether figures like him ever existed in an official capacity. There are records of urban health monitors and night inspectors during Augustus's reforms, but most of them were focused on fire risk and sanitation, not snoring. Still, evidence from fringe sources, mostly graffiti and fictional dialogues, suggest there were men and women hired for their ability to calm insula tensions, mediators, listeners, professional whisperers. One particularly strange scroll references somni custodes, keepers of sleep, who would walk the rooftops with slings of soft fruit to lob at offenders through open windows. Whether this was satire or strategy remains unclear. The Nightwalker doesn't throw fruit. He leaves bundles of chamomile at doors, hangs feathers from lintels, offers breath, realignment, scrolls written in broken hexameter. Some of it seems ludicrous, but then again, last night was the quietest it's been in weeks. You pass him on the stairs. He nods. "You're a left-leaning exhaler." He says, "You blink. Is that bad?" "Not unless the moon is waning." You keep walking. Later that night, you hear him working. Not loudly. Never that. Just the faint sound of cloth being pinned, reed mats being shifted, a sandal toe tapping twice for balance. At one point, you hear him humming, something ancient, something that wraps itself around your thoughts like a sleepy vine. You drift, not deeply, but willingly, and for the first time in your life, you dream about someone else not snoring. The next morning, your door bears a small inscription written in chalk. Sound level, acceptable. Dream texture, medium soft. Continue rituals. You stare at it, half amused, half unnerved. Did he watch you sleep? Does it matter? Because the building is quieter, not silent, never that, but calibrated, as if everyone has, without realizing it, begun to adjust. Brutus wears a neck roll now. Livia mumbles less. Even the rooster seems better behaved. The Nightwalker lingers another few days, then vanishes without ceremony. No goodbye, no invoice, just a folded barley mat left outside your door with a note, "For the nights that forget." And as the sun sets over the city once more, and the insula exhales together, in wood creaks and clay sighs, you realize something. Rome didn't just invent aqueducts, arches, or Senate politics. Rome invented coping. There are nights when everything feels still, the walls hold their breath, the cots stay quiet. Even Brutus manages to sleep like a soft old dog curled in a sunbeam. And on nights like that, rare, fleeting, borderline miraculous, you start to believe the insula has changed, evolved. That all the noise, complaints, charms, and Nightwalker interventions have somehow healed the bones of the building itself. But deep down, you know better. Stillness is suspicious. And like clockwork, something happens. It starts with a candle. Someone knocks one over. The floorboards dry as salted meat catch fast. You wake to the scent of smoke, the crackle of splintering beams, and someone screaming, "Not fire, but get the blankets," which somehow feels even more terrifying. You grab your satchel and run. The hallway is chaos. Half-dressed neighbors scramble past you. Livia clutches a cage with a pigeon in it. "My quietest neighbor," she mutters. Agrippina wears only a bed sheet and carries a jar of fish paste like it's sacred. Brutus bellows instructions that no one follows. A child throws a chamber pot out the window, possibly on purpose. The fire doesn't spread far, just a single room, smothered fast by soot-covered sandals, curses, and the collective panic of people who know how easily this place can end. But even after the smoke clears and the floor is scrubbed and the pigeons are comforted, no one sleeps, because the fear of fire, real fire, has come back, and it has teeth. Historians are clear on one point. Roman insulae were death traps, built tall, packed tight, lit by flame, and filled with every flammable item imaginable. A dropped oil lamp, A forgotten ember. One bad snorer turning too hard in his cot and knocking a torch against the wall. Gone. All of it. There are records of entire blocks disappearing overnight. Pliny the Elder once wrote that certain neighborhoods burned so fast they vanished without a single scream. Others describe walls bursting outward like lungs. And always the fire started at night. Some said it was fate, others negligence. A few even blamed sleepwalkers or, ironically, insomniacs pacing too close to braziers in your insula. That fear never quite leaves. You go to bed every night half listening, not just for snores, but for the flick of a spark, the roll of a coal, the snap of a reed. You start doing what many Romans did. Sleep with one sandal on. It's silly, feels foolish, but you're not alone. You notice the trends. Rolled up cloaks by doorways, buckets half filled and left in stairwells. One tenant installs a slanted ceramic tile above her cot to redirect falling embers. She explains. You don't question it. You even spot Publius himself inspecting the walls. With actual concern, he calls for a plasterer, replaces 2 torches with oil lamps, then raises rent by 1/3, citing structural heroism. The building survives, but the quiet changes. Snoring, once annoying, is now a comfort. Because if Brutus is snoring, he's not burning. If Agrippina's muttering, she's still alive. The Nightwalker doesn't return, but his notes do. Chalked phrases appear in corners like sleepy graffiti. Smoke travels faster than dreams. Wood remembers everything. If your silence is too quiet, check the ceiling. You don't know who writes them. Maybe everyone, maybe no one. And so, a new nightly ritual begins. Before sleep, the snore check and the ember check. A hand on the wall, a sniff in the air, a glance at the ceiling. It's not peace, but it's practice. Because in Rome, survival is a habit, even asleep. You train for it. The fire scare fades, as these things do, settling into memory like soot on plaster visible, but undisturbed if you don't touch it. Life in the insula resumes its normal rhythm, uneven footfalls on the stairs, laughter that turns into shouting, snoring that turns into folklore. But now there's a new kind of tension drifting in the air, and its name is Vespasian. Yes, the emperor himself. You hear the rumors first in the bathhouse, carried on damp steam and whispered like someone might be listening behind the tile grout, that he's doing something with sleep, something big. You scoff at first. The man built latrines and taxed urine. Surely, he's not thinking about bedtime. But then the scrolls appear, public notices posted near temples, bakeries, even the forum, sleep registry. Volunteers wanted. You raise an eyebrow. So do your neighbors. The fine print is vague mentions of rest optimization, nocturnal harmony, and something called somnium ordinatum, or the ordered sleep. One notice lists a contact address in the Calian Hill district. Another offers a loaf of bread for participation. 2. If you're known to snore. Of course, Brutus signs up. He returns 3 days later, eyes glassy, hair slightly singed, but carrying a certificate, a real one, stamped with an imperial seal. What did they do to you? You ask. He shrugs, measured my lungs, put me in a big stone room, gave me time broth, and told me to dream in Latin. You ask if it worked? He looks uncertain. I slept. I think I was watched by a goat. The word spreads fast. Vespasian is building a snore-proof barracks. Historians do confirm that the emperor was obsessed with efficiency. Soldiers who slept better fought better. Merchants who weren't cranky signed faster contracts. Even the city's bureaucracy ran smoother when clerks weren't nodding off mid-tablet. So why not experiment? According to fringe sources mostly recovered from half-burned archives near Tiber, Vespasian ordered a prototype constructed, a circular building made of acoustic marble, wool-lined beams, and strategically placed vents designed to redirect breaths. The walls were said to hum, the beds were tilted, the pillows stuffed with goose feathers only from geese raised on volcanic soil. It was called the Domus Silenti, the House of Silence. Inside, participants were monitored, not for criminal behavior, just for snoring. Every breath counted, cataloged, compared. The scrolls speak of a ratio of peaceful inhalation. Sleepers with the best scores were promised extra rations, civic rewards, even tax leniency. Some took to it. Others cracked. One man reportedly developed reverse snoring, a desperate attempt to inhale silently that made his exhale sound like a flute. He was dismissed with honors. You consider signing up. You imagine the stone room, the broth, the goat, but something in your gut says no. Besides, your insula is your home. Weird, creaky, nose-rattling home. So instead, you start your own experiment. You mark your nights. Which foods produce softer snores? Lentils, neutral, cheese, dangerous, garum. Only if you want dreams shaped like horns. You chart your neighbor's rhythms. Livia snores most aftermarket days. Agrippina only mutters during waxing moons. Brutus has a pattern so complex you consider chiseling it onto a wall for future generations. And slowly, you realize something. Sleep isn't just a function, it's culture. In Rome, you don't just fall asleep, you negotiate sleep with your bed, your body, your building, your empire. Every sound is a vote, every silence a strategy, and Vespasian's experiment. It may have been grand, imperial, idealized, but it never accounted for people like Livia clutching her pigeon, or Brutus curling around his certificate, or you curled sideways, foot propped on amphora, ear pressed to a barley mat that smells faintly of last year's harvest. No marble dome could recreate that. Tonight, the snoring returns, gentle, familiar. You smile. Because you're not in the Domus Silenti, you're home. It starts with a rumor, and like most Roman rumors, it begins in a tavern with too much fennel wine and someone trying to sound smarter than they are. Did you hear? They slur. Ostia's got whisper markets now. You blink. Markets that whisper. No, they reply, wide-eyed. Markets for whispering. You wait for the joke. It doesn't come. So the next time you're back in Ostia helping a friend transport salted fish past the forum's goat corridor, you investigate, and that's when you find it, tucked between two bathhouses and half hidden by a curtain of hanging laundry, a small, shaded alley painted with symbols that resemble ears. No signs, no shouting vendors, just soft murmurs and cloth-swathed stalls arranged like secret cubbies. You're inside the Sibylline Whisper Market or so. A note carved on a lintel says, very faintly, and yes, it is exactly what you think. Every stall here sells quiet, whisper-proof fabrics, reed-bundled slippers, clay window plugs designed to dampen street sounds, a jar labeled snore-dulling salve, which turns out to be goose fat mixed with crushed sage and licorice root. No one talks above a hush. Every transaction is done in gesture, or with tiny slates passed back and forth like gossip notes. And then beyond the sleep herbs, the barley fiber earmuffs, the chalked curses promising silence in 7 nights, you find the strangest item of all, rentable silence. It's a service, not a thing. You approach a stall where a woman in gray linen doesn't speak, just gestures to a clay tile. It lists rates by the hour. You rent a sound-free sleeping alcove, wool-lined, clay-backed, sealed with cork and prayer. You hand over 3 denarii and are led into a chamber the size of a bread oven. Inside, no echoes, no footsteps, not even the hum of Ostia's ever-moaning gulls. Just pure, oppressive stillness. And you hate it, because silence, real silence, is empty. There's no Agrippina muttering, no Brutus snorting, no Livia dragging her pigeon past your door. Just you, alone. And the buzzing inside your own skull. You don't stay long. When you leave, the gray linen woman nods knowingly. She's seen this before. The city may crave quiet, but it's addicted to noise. Later, you explore the rest of the market. There's a stall selling snore-proof bed mats woven from fish bladder and sea moss, supposedly invented by an old sailor who could only sleep during storms. They trick the ear into interpreting snores as waves. You lie on one. It smells awful, but strangely comforting. Another vendor offers ceramic whistles to blow at snorers, pitched in a frequency only they can hear. You're skeptical until you witness a test. The snorer, seated and dozing, jerks upright the moment the whistle is blown. The others hear nothing. Ghost note. The vendor whispers, ethically ambiguous. You're tempted, but what catches your attention most is the scroll stall. There, hand-scribed in barely legible ink, are the collected laws of sleep, unofficial, but widely cited. Rule 1. If your snoring wakes the rooster, you must share your breakfast. Rule 3. Never sleep facing the east wall of an insula built before Hadrian. Rule 5. If a fish seller's floor is directly below you, you have no legal rights to complain. Rule 7. Dreaming too loudly is considered fortune-telling and may require a license. You buy the scroll for fun, read it twice, laugh out loud, then roll it carefully and tuck it in your tunic. On your way back to Rome, the cart rattles over potholes as you think about the Whisper Market not as a place, but as a philosophy. Because in Rome, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's something you purchase, build, fight, or flee from. And sometimes, you find it only when wrapped in fish bladder, surrounded by muttering strangers, and wondering whether Rule 7 applies to you. That night, back in your insula, the snoring greets you like an old friend, and you let it, because the quietest room you've ever known was also the loneliest. And this is life. If the Whisper Market has taught you anything, it's that Romans could turn anything, even sleep deprivation, into comedy. And nowhere did that strange gift shine brighter than in the theaters. You head to a small comedy play in the Subra district. Cheap seats, wooden benches, the sort of show where the actors trip over props, and half the lines are improvised depending on whether someone in the crowd sneezes. Tonight's performance, a farce called Snorelius the Sleepless. The premise is absurd. A man named Snorelius moves into a new apartment. He thinks it's peaceful until night falls. His upstairs neighbor howls in his dreams. His downstairs neighbor dreams about howling. A third tenant sings lullabies in his sleep. Snorelius begs his landlord for help. The landlord, played by a man who's visibly holding in laughter, offers solutions. Stuff his ears with figs, rent a pet donkey as a bodyguard, bribe Mercury, or if all else fails, stop sleeping altogether. The crowd loves it. They cackle when the actors mime snoring with exaggerated gulps and throat clacks. They howl when Snorelius starts whisper screaming at a wall. And when a goat is dragged on stage with a sign that says, "New neighbor," you nearly spit out your date wine. Because it's all real. You've lived every beat of this play. The jokes may be exaggerated, but only slightly. Roman comedies often drew directly from daily life, especially in the Subura, where everyone lived too close to everyone else. Playwrights knew if you wanted laughs, write about sleep, or the lack of it. Even Plautus, the great Roman comedy writer, couldn't resist a good snore gag. In Pseudolus, a character complains that his neighbor's nose fights gladiators at night. In Amphitryon, snoring is likened to a trumpet that forgot the war is over. Historians still argue whether these lines were meant to shame real public figures, or just reflect the average Roman's nightly struggle. But either way, the message is clear. Snoring was public property. It wasn't just tolerated, it was mocked, mimicked, ritualized. And in the case of this play, monetized. After the show, you linger near the actor's tent. One of them, still wiping grease paint from his cheeks, sees you laughing and asks, "Lived with a snorer?" You nod. He chuckles. They're worse than senators. Then he tells you something interesting. The theater troupe used to travel with a real snorer, one of the stagehands. His sleep was so infamous, they'd bring him on stage during rehearsals just to time their jokes against his wheezes. One playwright even considered crediting him as chorus of the nose. He died last year. And now, they use a flute, played wrong, to simulate his snores. You can't write a better sound. The actor says, people hear it. They know. It hits something. Primal. You walk home that night thinking about that flute, about how something so annoying, so sleep-ruining, could become an instrument of laughter. You pass a chalk drawing on a wall. Two stick figures lying in beds. One snoring, the other throwing a sandal. Beneath it, in shaky Latin, if you can't sleep through it, write about it. And you do the next day. You carve a line into your windowsill. Snoring is proof we're still alive, just too loud about it. That night, Brutus snores louder than usual. Someone claps. Agrippina mutters a line from the play, and Livia hums the wrong end of a lullaby. You fall asleep laughing, because Rome doesn't hush. It echoes. The day begins with a breeze unusual for Rome, and for a moment, it carries the kind of quiet that feels ceremonial, as if the city has finally sighed out all its snorts, mutters, whispers, and wheezing. You stretch. The cot creaks. Brutus isn't snoring. He's baking. Yes, baking. He's taken to rising early and making oatcakes with too much anise. He claims it calms his lungs. You suspect it's an excuse to hover near the oven and grunt proudly. Agrippina waves at you. She's scrubbed her lintel with lemon peel and fishbone, the latest trick from the whisper markets. Livia is hanging her laundry with a pigeon balanced on her shoulder like a disapproving scarf. Life, in short, is functioning. And that's when it happens. Publius, your landlord, posts a scroll on the stairwell door. It's official. Sealed in red wax. Thick lettering. No scribbles. Tenant Gaius B. Top floor. Western unit is hereby evicted due to disruptive nocturnal breathing of excessive volume. Previously warned. Thrice observed. Never addressed. Appeal denied. Room to be reassigned to a deaf basket weaver. Everyone stops. Even the rooster. Gaius was, well, you knew, loud. A wall rattler. His snoring sounded like furniture sliding over wet marble. He insisted it was a family trait that his ancestors snored through sieges and sermons. But still, no one expected Publius to act. Yet here it is, landlord justice, sharp as a chisel. The scroll goes up before noon. By sunset, Gaius is gone. No fanfare, no shouting, just the thump of a mattress, a small cart rattling down the alley, and the echo of a man clearing his throat softly, almost politely for once. In his place comes the basket weaver, a man in his 50s with gentle eyes and a kind smile. He nods at everyone but says little. You learn later he's hard of hearing, sleeps like a stone, weaves like a god, doesn't snore. Everyone breathes easier. But strangely, that night feels eerie, too quiet. The familiar rumble above your ceiling gone. The floorboards don't hum. The rhythm of life, for all its annoyances, has shifted. And so, you do something unexpected. You write a note, short, honest, folded into a twist of cloth and left outside Gaius's old door. You were loud, but you were ours. Sleep well, wherever you land. You never know if he reads it, but somehow it helps. Because Roman apartments were never really about walls or rent or surviving the occasional collapse. They were about proximity. You didn't just live near people, you shared lives, dreams, fumes, dinners, tempers, breath, even snores. Tonight, you lie in bed. The cot creaks. A slight wheeze from Livia. A rustle from Agrippina's curtain. A pigeon flaps once, then settles. And for the first time, you don't dread the dark. You welcome it. Because sleep, in Rome, isn't escape. It's participation. It's accepting the chorus of humanity stacked 5 stories high. And it's knowing that even the most disruptive neighbor was just trying to rest like you. So now, as the city stills, let the rhythm of the insula rock you. Let the soft clatter of sandals on stairs echo faintly in your thoughts. Let the rustle of barley mats and the distant wheeze of a dreaming baker carry you gently toward rest. Feel the stone beneath your feet grow cool. The clay walls exhale warmth from the day's sun. The torchlight flickers one last time in the hallway before being snuffed with a soft tisk. Curtains draw, straw shifts, voices hush, the pigeon coos, the cot creaks once more. Then stillness, not silence. Never that, but balance. A balance struck between all the breathers, mutterers, and snorers, each playing their part in the living organism of your Roman home. You're just one pulse in the whole. Let your shoulders ease. Let your breath match the rhythm of the wood above you, the floor beneath you, even now. Brutus coughs just once and it's comforting. A reminder that someone else is still awake, but not for long. The air carries lavender from the corner. Faint, old, enough. Sleep doesn't ask for perfect quiet here. Just cooperation. Just the will to drift off. Even if the gods above giggle in their own sleep. And as your eyes close, you realize snoring was never the enemy. It was just the lullaby you had to learn how to love. Good night, citizen. Sweet dreams.